How's it going, everyone? Prime Driver Jacob here, sitting with my buddy Stephen.
What's going on, everybody?
Deuces. He's a flatbed driver over here at Prime. Recently just got into a lease purchase, so we'll go and get into his story here in a second. Right now we are sitting in his brand spanking new Peterbilt. How many miles we got on it now?
5,100.
5,100 miles. It's still got the plastic on some of the trim in here. Oh, that bugged me, just saying.
Yeah, well, you know.
So
that's why we're better than Rickford drivers.
Yeah, damn flatbed drivers. So
we gotta be someone's hero.
Yeah. So, did you start at Prime? Did you get your CDL somewhere else? How did you get your CDL?
I got my CDL through Prime. Went through the whole PSD program, TNT program. Came in with absolutely no experience. The only experience I had when it came to driving trucks was just driving them around our farm. I was a farm boy from North Carolina. I moved to Seattle about 8 years ago, but was a farm boy and drove our little trucks around the farm, hauled trailers around the farm, stuff like that. That was pretty much the only experience I really had. Other than that, I was as green as grass.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about your PSD. Go through your experience. Good pointers through your PSD program part. Do you remember?
The biggest thing I can tell anybody when it comes to when you're coming to Prime to do your PSD, get your license, everything else, and it's something that my cousin told me. She's the one that worked here and kind of recruited me to come here. Is it's an old saying that we've said around the small town where I'm from. It's the squeaky wheel always gets the oil. The one thing that I noticed a lot when I was in orientation was there was a lot of guys that basically seemed like this was a vacation. They didn't really take it serious, and you know, they'd come here and they didn't really put themselves out there, and then they were the ones sitting there waiting for a trainer. I think now, I could be wrong, you know, Jacob probably knows more about this, but I believe now they assign you a PSD trainer.
Yeah, you gotta, when you come through as a PSD now, like before when I was doing most of my PSD students, I was able to pick my students.
Right.
Now they've got it set up where it goes through a computer program and it matches how you answered questions and stuff like that. We still have the choice of the student. It's supposed to be a better filtering system, so it's a little bit different now. It's not quite as easy as it was before.
Yeah, before, when I've been at Prime now for right at 4 years, a little bit over 4 years. And when I came in, and Jacob had been here longer than me, I think he had been here for about a year by the time I came in. And when I came in, you know, you had to be picked by a trainer.
Yeah.
And you'd have guys that, and I'm sure Jacob had them in his class, they would just come and horse around and just didn't take it serious. So that was my number one point I tell everybody coming in. Even now, if you do get assigned to a trainer, put yourself out there. You know, before you get assigned, you might find someone before they're able to assign you, and you have someone lined up before your orientation's even over.
Yeah, the biggest thing I try and tell you guys is be where you're supposed to be, do what you're supposed to be doing.
They'll babysit you.
Yep.
I've seen many guys, and I'm sure any guys who watch this who've been to the orientation portion of Prime, they can vouch for this. I've seen many guys when I was in orientation that was late to their class they were supposed to be in, and Prime was like, see you.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't be on time for class, why do we trust you to haul, you know, so many $1,000s worth of freight, and you're supposed to be there at a certain time and you couldn't be here for class first thing in the morning? And they even give you a wake-up call at the Prime at the motel. So that was, you know, a lot of people weren't on time. They weren't taking it serious. My PSD experience was awesome.
Okay.
I had a good trainer. Basically, this is how it worked out. When I came here, you know, I flew in. I flew in a couple of days early before orientation started. Kind of got my feet wet, knowing where everything was, where the classrooms were going to be at. Started kind of talking to people. Followed, steps, went to the class, did what I needed to do, stayed up on everything. And then when, put myself out there when it came to when you go practice your pre-trips and your backing and your shifting. And I was putting myself out there. And because I was basically the mechanic on the farm, I knew a lot of how, I might not necessarily what the part was on these trucks. The basic, I knew the basics, but the compressor pump and stuff like that. I knew what it was. I didn't know exactly, I didn't know every in depth what it was, but I knew the basics of how it worked, what the purpose of it was. So it made it easier for me to pick up the pre-trip, knowing what that object did and the purpose of it. I feel like anybody, who's slightly, you got some mechanical skills in you, pre-trips is a lot easier for people.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I really put myself out there, really tried to help other people who I saw wasn't picking it up. My trainer, I had a trainer that was supposed to be coming to pick me up. He was texting me he's going to be up the following day. My trainer, David Rico Nelson, I don't know if you ever watched this, but he was a great trainer. And he doesn't train anymore, but he was out there. He was letting everybody do pre-trip on his truck. And he saw me out there, really put myself out there, trying to, make sure I was trying to soak it in. I really wanted to learn this. I had a lot riding on this. Yeah. And he saw it. I guess he saw what he liked, and it picked me and took me out, and we hit it off. We hit it off great. He was from South Carolina, me being from North Carolina. We just had a lot in common. We both, had, our backgrounds are roughly almost the same, and we just got along really well. He ended up keeping me TNT. I stayed TNT with him, and that's basically where you run team at that point with your trainer. PSD is basically, you do most of the driving. Your trainer sits in the passenger seat.
Yep.
And you just basically drive a normal shift. They watch you, make sure you can drive, shift, basically teach you enough to pass your test to get your CDL.
Okay. So, PSD, how much backing did you do before you tested?
I did all the backing.
Okay.
In the real world, my trainer made me do all the backing at every receiver and shipper.
Okay.
I was reefer when I first started out here.
Yeah.
I had to back up everywhere we were. He made me back up truck stops, receivers, shippers, everywhere. And then here, when I came back, I practiced for maybe 3-4 hours.
Okay. And nailed it. And
I felt comfortable with it, and we called it a night.
Did you trifecta when you tested?
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. That's the goal of what trainers is. You want to be able to, feel comfortable enough when you bring your student in to test that you know that they're going to trifecta. Now, if something, the mental lapse, something stupid happens, it's okay. That's part of the process. You can still retest. Okay, so you get your trifecta, go out TNT, 30,000 miles with them, minimum. Gotta stress that point. It's 30,000 minimum before you can come back in and upgrade.
And PSD now too is what, a minimum of 2 weeks?
2 weeks from your data permit.
Yeah.
See, when we came through, it was 75 hours that we had to actually log behind the wheel. It couldn't be 73, it couldn't be 74.
It had to be 75.
It had to be 75 plus. Most of my PSDs, when I was bringing them in to test, they were averaging 110 to 120 hours by the time we got back here to test. As I said, all the requirements that Prime gives you through the process, it's the minimum. It's not the golden standard when you have to be back and do and take your test and to upgrade and go through the process. TNT, did you guys run shifts at all, or is it just whose clock is up then run? Or
it was a mixture of both. It was basically, well, I wouldn't say it wasn't both. It was more like I drove nights. I'm not gonna lie, I drove nights through my whole training. As soon as we went to TNT, I drove all nights. I did that the whole time I was with him. That was just something he liked driving days, which was fine with me. I didn't mind driving nights. It was kind of rough at the beginning. I think it would have been easier for me if I had went straight from farming into driving a truck. Because on the farm, I was pulling late night shift, because we grew vegetables like that. So I was out at night spraying the herbicides and stuff for the plants. So staying up late was easy for me. But I did security in Washington. I did a lot of day shift. I got accustomed to being on day shift a lot. So the first couple of nights was kind of rough, but once my body got back into that loop again, it was pretty easy. And I enjoyed it because I didn't have to deal with the traffic. It was smooth sailing. He dealt with the traffic. I had to deal with none of that stuff. He was a great trainer also in an aspect as I'd drive all night. He would take over. I'd be dog tired. I'd pass out, go to sleep. And he'd wake me up in the middle of my sleep when I'm dead asleep and make me back into a dock. So I'd be half awake trying to back into a dock. And at first I was pissed. Like, man, this is BS, man. I was asleep. Like, dude, like, I get it. You want me to back up, but why do I have to back up every single time? And then after the first couple of nights, I'm like, okay, like, this is getting easier for me. Like, I just get up, I can back in. And he kept telling me, he goes, you're going to appreciate this when you go on your own. And at first I didn't really believe him. And then when I did go on my own, the first time I ever had to go on my own, and being in the middle of the night, being asleep, and they come down and go, hey, you're ready for you, back into the so-and-so door. And you're able to get up right there and just jump in that seat and back into a dock. Yep. And that was when I started looking back and, and realized how well that was. But yeah, I drove. It was basically, we had shifts. Basically, I had night shift. He did day shift. Sometimes we'd flip flop if it just worked that way. If if we got stuck in a shipper and his car got burnt out or something like that. But other than that, it was basically me night shift, him day shift, and then whatever the load required is what we ran. But he didn't like running over. His rule was either 500 miles a day for each shift or 10 hours, whichever came first. Usually it was 500 miles. And that was just for the simple fact that we didn't have to stop and do a 34. Okay. Because you're doing a 34, you're not making any money. Yeah. You're just sitting unless you can squeeze in a rolling 34, which it's pretty hard to do sometimes. Yeah. It's just you gotta have to be on a perfect load to do a rolling 34, and so that was his rule. Okay. And so I mean, yeah, it was a great experience. I had a really good trainer. That's the big thing about it out here. You gotta make sure you find someone that that is not just going to use you for a logbook. That's nothing I stress. I love Prime's training program. I'll tell you straight up now, I felt they have the best training program in the country when it comes to driving a truck. But on the flip side, I don't agree with some of the way some of the trainers do train here, because there's a lot here that just use you for a logbook. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush about it. They use you for a logbook, point blank, period. Yeah. And you don't learn nothing like that, and that's just something I was totally against. But
unfortunately, it's up to the students to report the problem.
If you don't say nothing, it will
never get fixed, and it keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. That's kind of one of the things I want to kind of address is some like training requirements and stuff like that, and maybe getting the evaluation once a year on especially PSD trainers to make sure that they can do the pre-trip and they can back in all the maneuvers. So that way, my feeling is if you can't pass a pre-trip or do the backing maneuvers, you should not be a PSD instructor.
I totally agree.
So it's kind of, and then if like anything from harassment, sexual harassment, you are gonna, but on the other side of it is you're gonna have disagreements with your trainer. You're living in what we call it, a 3x4 by 6 foot box with your trainer.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have
them every day.
Around them every day. I mean, you're gonna be smelling each other's farts, everything else. It's just one of those things. You're going to have disagreements. You're not going to see eye to eye all the time. What I try to tell all my students is if I say anything that offends you, ticks you off, or just comes across the wrong way, wait till we get back in the truck. We'll discuss it. If you do not feel happy with my answer, call my fleet manager. You have my fleet manager's number. If you do not feel comfortable with his number, I will give you the number for Stan Kaskerkey, Steve Larson, who's over TNT now. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. There's a new guy over TNT training, but I will get you their contact information. Call them. If you don't feel happy with their response,
get a hold of Rob Lowe.
Get a hold of Rob Lowe.
That's why I told all my. I was a trainer. I don't train anymore now that I'm lease purchased, but I haven't canceled it out that I won't train anymore. I only do TNT. I don't do PSD.
Okay.
But that's why I tell all my students when they get on my truck, look, man, I'm the kind of guy. Anybody who's watching this who knows me, I don't beat around the bush about things. I'm straightforward about stuff. I don't sugarcoat things. I just come out. If you're messing up, I'm gonna tell you straight, look, man, this is happening because you are doing this. Like, if you don't want this to happen, stop doing what you're doing. Like, come on, like I know you're not stupid. I mean, I don't. Come on, dude, please. Like, I'm not that way. I've never been that way. And I tell them, look, man, this is how I am. This is how I was raised up. This is how I'm just blunt. That's how I am.
We're here to do work, not play around.
Exactly.
And we take this very seriously, especially because what it boils down to is this truck is our livelihood. Without this truck turning and making miles, we're not making money. That means that's food off our plates for our families. So that we take it very important. So we all trainers, I had a set goal of we're going to learn this, kind of each step away, progress more and more information. If you're stuck on, say, step C a lot longer than what you should be, like what macros to be sending in at shippers and receivers, and when you get a load, if we got to focus on that for like 4 weeks of your TNT, I can't teach you about lease stuff because you're only on the truck for so long. I can't keep you on the truck forever. And it comes to a point where it's kind of like the bandage is once you get past your 30,000 miles, then it's up to the trainer to decide, can this guy successfully run the truck?
Yeah.
All my students, whether I agreed with them 100 way they were doing things or not, I knew that it's either going to be a sink or swim situation. They're going to take what I tell them seriously once they get on their own and realize that I was here to help them out. That's why I made sure they had notebooks set up with how to do everything. Or it's like, I know you can do it. You just need to do it without me there now.
Yeah.
So it's...
And the way I did things, I would give you the pointers on how to do something, but for the most part, I just let you do it. And when it's shifting, for example, I had a lot of guys that came in that had gotten their license from their home state, and so they didn't go through the PSD program. So basically, I was teaching them PSD without being a PSD trainer.
Yeah.
And so I would have to teach them how to shift. They knew the basics to get, to pass the test. That's all they knew. And so I would have to teach them all that stuff, and I would just like, okay, this is how you need to do it, and I would explain it, and that was about as far as I went with it. I didn't try to hold their hand. Like, I don't feel like you can learn that way. Yeah. So I would sit back and let them make the mistakes, let them screw up, let them grind gears, let them miss a gear. I'd let them do that. Yeah. I wouldn't let them get to it where we'd be in danger, but I'd let them screw up.
Yeah, even with backing.
At first, they'd be like, why are you not helping me? Well, I am helping, but have you noticed that you yesterday you grounded 15 times. Now you've only grinded 13 times.
Yep.
So now you're getting better. You might not notice it, but you are getting better because you're realizing what you're doing right, and your body's accustoming to it. Your mind is getting to the point where you're understanding it. And I did all my trainees like that, and by the time they got off my truck, they could shift as good as me, if not better than me.
Yep.
A lot of them went into automatic trucks, and they got off my truck, but what it is what it is. But that's how I did things. It's just that's everybody trains differently.
Yep.
But like as Jacob was saying, if you don't come out and say something, if you don't feel like you're being trained right, and you don't say anything, you have no reason to come back and complain that you didn't get trained right, because if you have to say something. If you don't say nothing, that trainer's going to continue training the next person, the exact same way.
Yep.
I'm not saying, I'm not sure belittling prom. I love prom. I don't never want to leave prom. But there's always going to be flaws in the program somewhere.
Yep.
And usually the flaws always come back to those there's a lot of great trainers here. Jacob being one of them. I know Jacob. Yeah. Jacob's a great trainer. He's got all the rewards, the rewards and trophies to prove it. But there is a lot of guys here who just, excuse my language, don't give a damn.
Yeah.
You know, they're here to make a check. They don't care what happens to you when you get off their truck. Yep. As long as they made TM money that week.
Yeah.
2 squirts of piss, what happens to you?
Yep.
And if you don't say nothing, they just do it to the next guy.
Yeah.
Until finally someone does something, say something, or something major something happens really bad. You know.
Okay. So let's step back a little bit. So end your TNT. Did you go company or lease?
I went lease.
So you went lease straight out of training.
Straight out of training.
Okay. Would you recommend people to do that?
Depends on who trained them.
Okay.
I went straight lease for the simple fact because my TNT trainer was an owner-operator. He owns 3 trucks here. Very, very knowledgeable person. He had a bachelor's degree in business management. So he was very knowledgeable. He tracked every number of every cent of fuel, whatever we were doing, and he passed that on to me. So I felt really comfortable when I got this truck to run my own truck as a lease operator. It's basically goes right back to how you're trained. I mean, if you got a guy that's willing to teach you, like when I did my TNTs, if they said they wanted to go lease, okay, I'm gonna teach you the basis of how I run. The way I run my truck might not work for you on your own truck, but this is how I do it. Here's the basics.
The basics, and you got to build off of it.
And you got to build off it and make it work for you. You know, critique it to what makes works for you. But if you have a trainer that's not really giving you a lot, teaching you a lot about lease, I wouldn't do it. I feel that you should go. It's not just only about how to buy fuel and all that good jazz. I mean, that's important, but you need to learn your freight lanes. You know, where to buy fuel, when to buy fuel. You know, what's a good load, what's not a good load. You know, should I take this crappy load to get to this area or not? You know, so on and so forth. You know,
understand why all of a sudden you're getting told to deadhead 600 plus miles.
Why you're having to do that? You know, to make business decisions. So.